The Tales of the Laxdale Saga is brought to you by NotaProfit.org, the place on the internet to find spiritual guidance powered by artificial intelligence. The Laxdale Saga, Part 3, Chapter Roman 21. Olaf the Peacock goes to Ireland, A.D. 956. Now Hoskuld came back from the Thing and heard these tidings, and was very much displeased. But seeing that his near akin were concerned in the matter, he quieted down and let things alone. Olaf and his companions had a good voyage, and came to Norway. Orn urges Olaf to go to the court of King Harald, who, he said, bestowed goodly honor on men of no better breeding than Olaf was. Olaf said he thought he would take that counsel. Olaf and Orn now went to the court, and were well received. The king at once recognized Olaf for the sake of his kindred, and forthwith bade him stay with him. Gunnhild paid great heed to Olaf when she knew he was Hrut's brother's son, but some men would have it that she took pleasure in talking to Olaf without his needing other people's aid to introduce him. As the winter wore on, Olaf grew sadder of mood. Orn asked him what was the matter of his sorrow. Olaf answered, I have on hand a journey to go west over the sea, and I set much store by it, and that you should lend me your help, so that it may be undertaken in the course of next summer. Orn bade Olaf not set his heart on going, and said he did not know of any ships going west over the sea. Gunnhild joined in their talk, and said, Now I hear you talk together in a manner that has not happened before, in that each of you wants to have his own way. Olaf greeted Gunnhild well, without letting drop their talk. After that Orn went away, but Gunnhild and Olaf kept conversing together. Olaf told her of his wish, and how much store he set by carrying it out, saying he knew for certain that Myrkjartan, the king, was his mother's father. Then Gunnhild said, I will lend you help for this voyage, so that you may go on it as richly furnished as you please. Olaf thanked her for her promise. Then Gunnhild had a ship prepared, and a crew got together, and bade Olaf say how many men he would have to go west over the sea with him. Olaf fixed the number at 60, but said that it was a matter of much concern to him, that such a company should be more like warriors than merchants. She said that so it should be, and Orn is the only man mentioned by name in company with Olaf on this journey. The company were well fitted out. King Harald and Gunnhild led Olaf to his ship, and they said they wished to bestow on him their good luck over and above other friendship they had bestowed on him already. King Harald said that was an easy matter, for they must say that no goodlier a man had in their days come out of Iceland. Then Harald the king asked how old a man he was. Olaf answered, I am now 18 winters. The king replied, Of exceeding worth indeed are such men as you are, for as yet you have left the age of child but a short way behind, and be sure to come and see us when you come back again. Then the king and Gunnhild bade Olaf farewell. Then Olaf and his men got on board, and sailed out to sea. They came in for unfavorable weather through the summer, had fogs plentiful and little wind, and what there was unfavorable, and wide about the main they drifted, and on most on board fell sea bewilderment. But at last the fog lifted overhead, and the wind rose, and they put up sail. Then they began to discuss in which direction Ireland was to be sought, and they did not agree on that. Orn said one thing, and most of the men went against him, and said that Orn was all bewildered. They should rule who were the greater in number. Then Olaf was asked to decide. He said, I think we should follow the counsel of the wisest, for the counsels of foolish men I think will be of all the worse service for us in the greater number they gather together. And now they deemed the matter settled, since Olaf spake in this manner, and Orn took the steering from that time. They sailed for days and nights, but always with very little wind. One night the watchman leapt up, and bade every one wake at once, and said they saw land so near that they had almost struck on it. The sail was up, but there was but little wind. Every one got up, and Orn bade them clear away from the land, if they could. Olaf said, That is not the way out of our plight, for I see reefs all about astern. So let down the sail at once, and we will take our counsel when there is daylight, and we know what land this is." Then they cast anchors, and they caught bottom at once. There was much talk during the night as to where they could be come to, and when daylight was up, they recognized that it was Ireland. Orn said, "I don't think we have come to a good place, for this is far away from the harbors or market towns, whose strangers enjoy peace, and we are now left high and dry, like sticklebacks, and near enough, I think, I come to the laws of the Irish in saying that they will lay claim to the goods we have on board as their lawful prize. For as flotsam they put down ships even when sea has ebbed out shorter from the stern than here." Olaf said no harm would happen, but I have seen that today there is a gathering of men up inland, so the Irish think, no doubt, the arrival of this ship a great thing. During the ebb tide today I noticed that there was a dip, and that out of the dip the sea fell without emptying it out, and if our ship has not been damaged, we can put out our boat and tow the ship into it. There was a bottom of loam where they had been riding at anchor, so that not a plank of the ship was damaged. So Olaf and his men towed their boat to the dip, cast anchor there. Now, as day drew on, crowds drifted down to the shore. At last 2 men rowed a boat out to the ship. They asked what men they were who had charge of that ship, and Olaf answered, speaking in Irish, to their inquiries. When the Irish knew they were Norwegians, they pleaded their law, and bade them give up their goods, and if they did so, they would do them no harm till the king had sat in judgment on their case. Olaf said the law only held good when merchants had no interpreter with them. But I can say with truth these are peaceful men, and we will not give ourselves up untried. The Irish then raised a great cry, and waded out into the sea, and wished to drag the ship with them on board to the shore, the water being no deeper than reaching up to their armpits, or to the belts of the tallest, but the pool was so deep where the ship was floating that they could not touch the bottom. Olaf bade the crew fetch out their weapons, and range in line of battle from stem to stern on the ship, and so thick they stood, that shield overlapped shield all round the ship, and a spear point stood out at the lower end of every shield. Olaf walked forward to the prow, and was thus arrayed. He had a coat of mail, and a gold-reddened helmet on his head, girt with a sword with gold, inlaid hilt, and in his hand a barbed spear chased and well engraved. A red shield he had before him, on which was drawn a lion in gold. When the Irish saw this array, fear shot through their hearts, and they thought it would not be so easy a matter as they had thought to master the booty. So now the Irish break their journey, and run all together to a village near. Then there arose great murmur in the crowd, as they deemed that, sure enough, this must be a war-ship, and that they must expect many others. So they sent speedily word to the king, which was easy, as he was at that time a short way off, feasting. Straightway he rides with a company of men to where the ship was. Between the land and the place where the ship lay afloat, the space was no greater than that one might well hear men talking together. Now Olaf stood forth in the same arrayal, whereof is written before, and men marvelled much how noble was the appearance of the man who was the captain of the ship. But when the shipmates of Olaf see how a large company of knights rides towards them, looking a company of the bravest, they grow hushed, for they deemed here were great odds to deal with. But when Olaf heard the murmur which went round among his followers, he bade them take heart, for now our affairs are in a fair way. The Irish are now greeting Myrkjartan, their king. Then they rowed so near to the ship, that each could hear what the other said. The king asked who was the master of the ship. Olaf told his name, and asked who was the valiant, looking knight with whom he then was talking. He answered, I am called Myrkjartan. Olaf asked, Are you then a king of the Irish? He said he was. Then the king asked Olaf for news commonly talked of, and Olaf gave good answers as to all news he was asked about. Then the king asked whence they had put to sea, and whose men they were. And still the king asked, more searchingly than before, about Olaf's kindred, for the king found that this man was of haughty bearing, and would not answer any further than the king asked. Olaf said, "Let it be known to you that we ran our ship afloat from the coast of Norway, and these are of the bodyguard of King Harald, the son of Gunnhild, who are here on board. And as for my race, I have, sire, to tell you this, that my father lives in Iceland, and is named Hoskuld, a man of high birth. But of my mother's kindred, I think you must have seen many more than I have, for my mother is called Melkorka, and it has been told me as a truth that she is your daughter, king. Now, this has driven me upon this long journey, and to me it is a matter most weighty what answer you give in my case." The king then grew silent, and had a converse with his men. The wise men asked the king what might be the real truth of the story that this man was telling. The king answered, "This is clearly seen in this Olaf, that he is a high-born man, whether he be a kinsman of mine or not, as well as this, that of all men he speaks the best of Irish." After that the king stood up and said, "Now I will give answer to your speech, in so far as we grant to you and all your shipmates peace. But on the kinship you claim with us, we must talk more before I give answer to that." After that they put out their gangways to the shore, and Olaf and his followers went on land from the ship. And the Irish now marvel much how warrior, like these men are. Olaf greeted the king well, taking off his helmet and bowing to the king, who welcomes Olaf with all fondness. Thereupon they fall to talking together, Olaf pleading his case again in a speech long and frank. And at the end of his speech he said he had a ring on his hand that Melkorka had given him parting in Iceland, saying that you, king, gave to her as a tooth gift. The king took and looked at the ring, and his face grew wondrous red to look at. And then the king said, "True enough are the tokens, and become by no means less notable thereby that you have so many of your mother's family features, and that even by them you might be easily recognized. And because of these things I will in sooth acknowledge your kinship, Olaf, by the witnessing of these men that here are near and hear my speech. And this shall also follow that I will ask you to my court, with all your suite. But the honor of you all will depend thereon of what worth as a man I find you to be when I try you more." After that the king orders riding, horses to be given to them, and appoints men to look after their ship, and to guard the goods belonging to them. The king now rode to Dublin, and men thought this great tidings, that with the king should be journeying the son of his daughter, who had been carried off in war long ago when she was only 15 winters old. But most startled of all at these tidings was the foster, mother of Melkorka, who was then bedridden, both from heavy sickness and old age, yet she walked with no staff even to support her, to meet Olaf. The king said to Olaf, "Here is come Melkorka's foster, mother, and she will wish to hear all the tidings you can tell about Melkorka's life." Olaf took her with open arms, and set the old woman on his knee, and said her foster, Otter was well settled, and in a good position in Iceland. Then Olaf put in her hands the knife and the belt, and the old woman recognized the gifts and wept for joy, and said it was easy to see that Melkorka's son was one of high mettle, and no wonder, seeing what stock he comes of. The old woman was strong and well, and in good spirits all that winter. The king was seldom at rest, for at that time the lands in the west were at all times raided by war bands. The king drove from his land that winter both Vikings and raiders. Olaf was with his suite in the king's ship, and those who came against them thought his was indeed a grim company to deal with. The king talked over with Olaf and his followers all matters needing counsel, for Olaf proved himself to the king, both wise and eager-minded in all deeds of prowess. But towards the latter end of the winter the king summoned a thing, and great numbers came. The king stood up and spoke. He began his speech thus, "You all know that last autumn there came hither a man who is the son of my daughter, and highborn also on his father's side, and it seems to me that Olaf is a man of such prowess and courage that here such men are not to be found. Now I offer him my kingdom after my day is done, for Olaf is much more suitable for a ruler than my own sons." Olaf thanked him for this offer with many graceful and fair words, and said he would not run the risk as to how his sons might behave when Myrkjartan was no more, said it was better to gain swift honor than lasting shame, and added that he wished to go to Norway when ships could safely journey from land to land, and that his mother would have little delight in life if he did not return to her. The king bade Olaf do as he thought best. Then the thing was broken up. When Olaf's ship was ready, the king saw him off on board, and gave him a spear chased with gold, and a gold-bedecked sword, and much money besides. Olaf begged that he might take Melkorka's foster mother with him, but the king said there was no necessity for that, so she did not go. Then Olaf got on board his ship, and he and the king parted with the greatest friendship. Then Olaf sailed out to sea. They had a good voyage, and made land in Norway, and Olaf's journey became very famous. They set up their ship, and Olaf got horses for himself, and went, together with his followers, to find King Harald. Chapter 22. Olaf the Peacock comes home to Iceland. A.D. 957. Olaf Hoskaldsson then went to the court of King Harald. The king gave him a good welcome, but Gunnhild a much better. With many fair words they begged him to stay with them, and Olaf agreed to it, and both he and Orn entered the king's court. King Harald and Gunnhild set so great a store by Olaf that no foreigner had ever been held in such honor by them. Olaf gave to the king and Gunnhild many rare gifts, which he had got west in Ireland. King Harald gave Olaf at Yule a set of clothes made out of scarlet stuff. So now Olaf stayed there quietly all the winter. In the spring, as it was wearing on, Olaf and the king had a conversation together, and Olaf begged the king's leave to go to Iceland in the summer. For I have noble kinsfolk there I want to go and see. The king answered, It would be more to my mind that you should settle down with us, and take whatever position in our service you like best yourself. Olaf thanked the king for all the honor he was offering him, but said he wished very much to go to Iceland, if that was not against the king's will. The king answered, Nothing shall be done in this in an unfriendly manner to you. Olaf, you shall go out to Iceland in the summer, for I see you have set your heart on it. But neither trouble nor toil shall you have over your preparations, for I will see after all that. And thereupon they part talking. King Harald had a ship launched in the spring. It was a merchant ship, both great and good. This ship the king ordered to be laden with wood, and fitted out with full rigging. When the ship was ready, the king had Olaf called to him, and said, This ship shall be your own, Olaf, for I should not like you to start from Norway this summer as a passenger in any one else's ship. Olaf thanked the king in fair words for his generosity. After that Olaf got ready for his journey, and when he was ready and a fair wind arose, Olaf sailed out to sea, and King Harald and he parted with the greatest affection. That summer Olaf had a good voyage. He brought his ship into Ram, Firth to Bor, Dare. The arrival of the ship was soon heard of, and also who the captain was. Hoskuld heard of the arrival of Olaf his son, and was very much pleased, and rode forthwith north to Hrutafjord with some men, and there was a joyful meeting between the father and son. Hoskuld invited Olaf to come to him, and Olaf said he would agree to that. So he set up his ship, but his goods were brought on horseback from the north. And when this business was over, Olaf himself rode with 12 men home to Hoskuldstead, and Hoskuld greeted his son joyfully, and his brothers also received him fondly, as well as all his kinsfolk. But between Olaf and Bard was love the fondest. Olaf became very renowned for this journey, and now was proclaimed the descent of Olaf, that he was the daughter's son of Myrkjartan, king of Ireland. The news of this spread over the land, as well as of honor that mighty men, whom he had gone to see, had bestowed on him. Melkorka came soon to see Olaf, her son, and Olaf greeted her with great joy. She asked about many things in Ireland, first her father, and then of her other relations. Olaf replied to everything she asked. Then she asked if her foster mother still lived. Olaf said she was still alive. Melkorka asked why he had not tried to give her the pleasure of bringing her over to Iceland. Olaf replied, They would not allow me to bring your foster mother out of Ireland, mother. That may be so, she replied, and it could be seen that this she took much to heart. Melkorka and Thorbjorn had one son, who was named Lambi. He was a tall man and strong, like his father in looks as well as in temper. When Olaf had been in Iceland a month, and spring came on, father and son took counsel together. I will, Olaf, said Hoskuld, that a match should be sought for you, and that then you should take over the house of your foster father at Godestead, where still there are great means stored up, and that then you should look after the affairs of that household under my guidance. Olaf answered, Little have I set my mind on that sort of thing hitherto. Besides, I do not know where that woman lives whom to marry would mean any great good luck to me. You must know I shall look high for a wife. But I see clearly that you would not have broached this matter till you had made up your mind as to where it was to end. Hoskuld said, You guess that right. There is a man named Egil. He is Skallagrim's son. He lives at Borg in Borgarfjord. This Egil has a daughter who is called Thorgerd, and she is the woman I have made up my mind to woo on your behalf, for she is the very best match in all Borgarfjord, and even if one went further afield. Moreover, it is to be looked for that an alliance with the Mere men would mean more power to you. Olaf answered, Herein I shall trust to your foresight, for if this match were to come off it would be altogether to my liking. But this you must bear in mind, father, that should this matter be set forth, and not come off, I should take it very ill. Hoskuld answered, I think I shall venture to bring the matter about. Olaf bade him do as he liked. Now time wears on towards the thing. Hoskuld prepares his journey from home with a crowded company, and Olaf, his son, also accompanies him on the journey. They set up their booth. A great many people were there. Egil Skallagrim's son was at the thing. Every one who saw Olaf remarked what a handsome man he was, and how noble his bearing, well arrayed as he was to weapons and clothes. Chapter Roman 23. The marriage of Olaf Peacock and Thorgerd, the daughter of Egil, A.D. 959. It is told how one day the father and son, Hoskuld and Olaf, went forth from their booth to find Egil. Egil greeted them well, for he and Hoskuld knew each other very well by word of mouth. Hoskuld now broaches the wooing on behalf of Olaf, and asks for the hand of Thorgerd. She was also at the thing. Egil took the matter well, and said he had always heard both father and son well spoken of. And I also know, Hoskuld, said Egil, that you are a high-born man and of great worth, and Olaf is much renowned on account of his journey, and it is no wonder that such men should look high for a match, for he lacks neither family nor good looks. But yet this must be talked over with Thorgerd, for it is no man's task to get Thorgerd for wife against her will. Hoskuld said, I wish, Egil, that you would talk this over with your daughter. Egil said that that should be done. Egil now went away to find his daughter, and they talked together. There is here a man named Olaf, who is Hoskuld's son, and he is now one of the most renowned of men. Hoskuld, his father, has broached a wooing on behalf of Olaf, and has sued for your hand, and I have left that matter mostly for you to deal with. Now I want to know your answer. But it seems to me that it behoves you to give a good answer to such a matter, for this match is a noble one. Thorgerd answered, I have often heard you say that you love me best of all your children, but now it seems to me you make that a falsehood if you wish me to marry the son of a bondswoman, however goodly and great a dandy he may be. Egil said, In this matter you are not so well up as in others. Have you not heard that he is the son of the daughter of Myrkjartan, king of Ireland, so that he is much higher born on his mother's side than on his father's, which, however, would be quite good enough for us. Thorgerd would not see this, and so they dropped the talk, each being somewhat of a different mind. The next day Egil went to Hoskuld's booth. Hoskuld gave him a good welcome, and so they fell talking together. Hoskuld asked how this wooing matter had sped. Egil held out but little hope, and told him all that had come to pass. Hoskuld said it looked like a closed matter, yet I think you have behaved well. Olaf did not hear this talk of theirs. After that Egil went away. Olaf now asks, How speeds the wooing? Hoskuld said, It pointed to slow speed on her side. Olaf said, It is now as I told you, father, that I should take it very ill if in answer to the wooing I should have to take shaming words, seeing that the broaching of the wooing gives undue right to the wooed. And now I shall have my way so far, that this shall not drop here. For true is the saw, that others' errands eat the wolves, and now I shall go straight way to Egil's booth. Hoskuld bade him have his own way. Olaf now dressed himself in this way, that he had on the scarlet clothes King Harald had given him, and a golden helmet on his head, and the gold. adorned sword in his hand that King Myrkjartan had given him. Then Hoskuld and Olaf went to Egil's booth. Hoskuld went first, and Olaf followed close on his heels. Egil greeted him well, and Hoskuld sat down by him, but Olaf stood up and looked about him. He saw a woman sitting on the dais in the booth. She was goodly and had the looks of one of high degree, and very well dressed. He thought to himself this must be Thorgerd, Egil's daughter. Olaf went up to the dais and sat down by her. Thorgerd greeted the man, and asked who he was. Olaf told his own and his father's name, and you must think it very bold that the son of a slave should dare to sit down by you, and presume to talk to you. She said, "You cannot but mean that you must be thinking you have done deeds of greater daring than that of talking to women." Then they began to talk together, and they talked all day, but nobody heard their conversation, and before they parted Egil and Hoskuld were called to them, and the matter of Olaf's wooing was now talked over again, and Thorgerd came round to her father's wish. Now the affair was all easily settled, and the betrothal took place. The honor was conceded to the salmon, river, dale men that the bride should be brought home to them, for by law the bridegroom should have gone to the bride's home to be married. The wedding was to take place at Hoskuldstead when 7 weeks' summer had passed. After that Egil and Hoskuld separated. The father and son rode home to Hoskuldstead, and all was quiet the rest of the summer. After that things were got ready for the wedding at Hoskuldstead, and nothing was spared, for means were plentiful. The guests came at the time settled, and the Bergfirthmen mustered in a great company. Egil was there, and Thorstein his son. The bride was in the journey too, and with her a chosen company out of all the countryside. Hoskuld had also a great company awaiting them. The feast was a brave one, and the guests were seen off with good gifts on leaving. Olaf gave to Egil the sword, Myrkjartan's gift, and Egil's brow brightened greatly at the gift. Nothing in the way of tidings befell, and everyone went home. Chapter Roman 24. The building of Herdholt, A.D. 962. Olaf and Thorgerd lived at Hoskuldstead, and loved each other very dearly. It was easily seen by every one that she was a woman of very high mettle, though she meddled little with everyday things. But whatever Thorgerd put her hand to must be carried through as she wished. Olaf and Thorgerd spent that winter turn and turnabout at Hoskuldstead, or with Olaf's father. In the spring Olaf took over the household business at Godestad. The following summer Thord fell ill, and the illness ended in his death. Olaf had a cairn raised over him on the ness that runs out into the salmon river, and is called Drafen, ness, with a wall round which is called House, Garth. After that liegemen crowded to Olaf, and he became a great chieftain. Hoskuld was not envious of this, for he always wished that Olaf should be consulted in all great matters. The place Olaf owned was the stateliest in salmon, river, dale. There were 2 brothers with Olaf, both named An. One was called An the White, and the other An the Black. They had a 3rd brother who was named Bainar the Strong. These were Olaf's smiths, and very valiant men. Thorgerd and Olaf had a daughter who was named Thurid. The land that Hrap had owned all lay waste, as has been told before. Olaf thought that it lay well, and set before his father his wishes on the matter, how they should send down to Trefil with this errand, that Olaf wished to buy the land, and other things thereto belonging. At Hrapstead it was soon arranged, and the bargain settled, for Trefil saw that better was 1 crow in the hand than 2 in the wood. The bargain arranged was that Olaf should give 3 marks of silver for the land, yet that was not fair price, for the lands were wide and fair, and very rich in useful produce, such as good salmon fishing and seal catching. There were wide woods too, a little further up than Hoskuldstead, north of the salmon river, in which was a space cleared, and it was well nigh a matter of certainty that the flocks of Olaf would gather together there, whether weather was hard or mild. One autumn it befell that on that same hill Olaf had built a dwelling of the timber that was cut out of the forest, though some he got together from driftwood strands. This was a very lofty dwelling. The building stood empty through the winter. The next spring Olaf went thither, and first gathered together all his flocks, which had grown to be a great multitude, for, indeed, no man was richer in live stock in all Broadfirth. Olaf now sent word to his father that he should be standing out of doors and have a look at his train as he was moving to his new home, and should give him his good wishes. Hoskuld said so it should be. Olaf now arranged how it should be done. He ordered that all the sheest of his cattle should be driven first, and then the milking live stock, then came the dry cattle, and the pack horses came in the last place, and men were ranged with the animals to keep them from straying out of straight line. When the van of the train had got to the new homestead, Olaf was just riding out of Godestad, and there was nowhere a gap breaking the line. Hoskuld stood outside his door together with those of his household. Then Hoskuld spake, bidding Olaf his son welcome and abide all honor to this new dwelling of his. And somehow my mind forebodes me that this will follow, that for a long time his name will be remembered. Jorun his wife said, wealth enough the slave's son has got for his name to be long remembered. At the moment that the house, Carls, had unloaded the pack horses, Olaf rode into the place. Then he said, now, you shall have your curiosity satisfied with regard to what you have been talking about all the winter, as to what this place shall be called. It shall be called Herdholt. Every one thought this a very happy name, in view of what used to happen there. One Olaf now sets up his household at Herdholt, and a stately one it soon became, and nothing was lacking there. And now the honor of Olaf greatly increased, there being many causes to bring it about. Olaf was the most beloved of men, for whatever he had to do with affairs of men, he did so that all were well contented with their lot. His father backed him up very much towards being a widely honored man, and Olaf gained much in power from his alliance with the mere men. Olaf was considered the noblest of all Hoskuld's sons. First winter that Olaf kept house at Herdholt, he had many servants and workmen, and work was divided amongst the house, Carls. One looked after the dry cattle, and another after the cows. The fold was out in the wood, some way from the homestead. One evening the man who looked after the dry cattle came to Olaf, and asked him to make some other man look after the neat, and set apart for me some other work. Olaf answered, I wish you to go on with this same work of yours. The man said he would sooner go away. Then you think there is something wrong, said Olaf. I will go this evening with you when you do up the cattle, and if I think there is any excuse for you in this, I will say nothing about it. But otherwise you will find that your lot will take some turn for the worse. Olaf took his gold, set spear, the king's gift, in his hand, and left home, and with him the house, Carl. There was some snow on the ground. They came to the fold, which was open, and Olaf bade the house Carl go in. I will drive up the cattle, and you tie them up as they come in. The house, Carl went to the fold door, and all unawares Olaf finds him leaping into his open arms. Olaf asked why he went on so terrified. He replied, a trap stands in the doorway of the fold, and felt after me, but I have had my fill of wrestling with him. Olaf went to the fold door and struck at him with his spear. A trap took the socket of the spear in both hands and wrenched it aside, so that forthwith the spear shaft broke. Olaf was about to run at a trap, but he disappeared there where he stood, and there they parted, Olaf having the shaft and trap the spearhead. After that Olaf and the housecarl tied up the cattle and went home. Olaf saw the housecarl was not to blame for his grumbling. The next morning Olaf went to where Atrap was buried and had him dug up. Atrap was found undecayed, and there Olaf also found his spearhead. After that he had a pyre made and had Atrap burnt on it, and his ashes were flung out to sea. After that no one had any more trouble with Atrap's ghost.